They say that, in the heart of the oldest forest, there exists a village that time forgot. Its thatched houses rise in circles, lit by fires that never go out, and its inhabitants live in harmony with the secrets of the forest. There, every stone has a story, every tree holds a spirit, and each night is lulled by the sound of drums that seem to converse with the stars. This is where Tupan, known as the Wanderer of Kalari, was born. Since childhood, he had mysterious marks on his skin and a restlessness that drove him beyond the village's borders. While others were content with a simple life, Tupan felt the call of the forest, as if something awaited him on the paths no one dared to tread. But what could be so powerful that it could drive a young man from his own village? What enigmas could the woods hide, capable of transforming a simple hunter into an eternal legend? These answers lie not in books, but in the silence of the forest, where every shadow can be a warning, and every whisper a destiny. And before I continue this ancient story, are you already subscribed to this channel? If not, subscribe now, like it, and let me know what you think in the comments. This helps spread these legends and keep the story alive. Now, get ready. Tupan's journey is just beginning. On the banks of misty rivers, hidden beneath the shade of trees so tall they seemed to touch the sky, stood the village of Kalari. The wind, as it passed, carried the sound of distant drums, as if the very heart of the forest beat with its people. The straw and mud huts rose in circles, connected by dirt paths, where children ran free, laughing like birds in flight. The days in Kalari dawned shrouded in a soft mist, making the forest seem like a waking dream. The sun took its time breaking through the white blanket, and when it finally did, it illuminated faces painted with anato and jenny. Each resident carried within them a sense of belonging to something greater, as if the spirit of the forest lived within each of them. At night, the fire of the great bonfire became the heart of the village. Men, women, and children gathered to hear ancient stories, passed down from generation to generation. The elders, with slow, deep voices, told secrets that seemed to travel through the air and mingle with the stars. There, no one doubted that the forest had eyes, ears, and even memory. It was in this setting of mystery and belonging that destinies were shaped. Every corner of the village held a memory. Every stone seemed to hide a legend. And it was there, amidst this place where reality and enchantment intertwined, that Tupan's life began to take shape. In Kalari, every daily gesture was laden with symbolism. The act of hunting, for example, was not only about nourishing the body, but also about honoring the spirit of the forest. Before each departure, hunters painted their faces with red and black lines, believing that this way, the forest would recognize them as legitimate children, not invaders. Upon each return, there was always a song of thanksgiving, as if the fallen animal were a gift from the land itself. The village women held ancient secrets in their hands. They wove necklaces of bones, seeds, and feathers, symbols of protection worn by warriors and travelers. With infinite patience, they molded the beauty of the forest into each piece, transforming nature into a living memory. The necklaces were seen not as adornments, but as bridges between the visible and invisible worlds. On full moon nights, Kalari transformed into a stage of sound and movement. Men and women danced in a circle, while young people beat drums made of hollowed-out trunks, keeping time with their steps. Each dance told a story of victory, loss, or rebirth. Those observing from outside could swear it wasn't just the people dancing, but the forest itself swaying. These customs kept the connection between the village and the unknown alive. It was as if Kalari breathed alongside its inhabitants, guarding secrets in every rite, in every repeated gesture. And in this environment marked by tradition, Tupan began to feel that his place in the world might be greater than the space outlined by the village. The elders of Kalari were seen as the village's living memory, sitting on their wooden benches, their eyes half closed, and their skin scarred by time. They carried stories that seemed to have no beginning or end. For them, each life was a cycle, and each cycle held an invisible mission. They believed that no one was born by chance, and that even the stones along the path had a predetermined destiny. Among the most strongly held beliefs was that each person carried within them a dormant spirit. This spirit, they said, only awakened when someone dared to cross the forest's edge and confront the unknown. It was during this crossing that the true self emerged, revealing the reason each being had come into the world. Many feared this awakening, but others, like Tupan, felt it burning within their hearts. The elders' words were shrouded in enigma. They spoke of rivers that changed course to test the courage of travelers, of trees that held the souls of ancient warriors, and of paths that opened only to those brave enough to overcome their fear. The village listened reverently, knowing that hidden within their soft words were truths greater than any hunt or harvest. For Tupan, these stories weren't just legends to lull him to sleep. He felt them like callings, as if each phrase were a spark igniting something he didn't yet understand. Deep down, he felt like these beliefs spoke directly to him, as if the elders were describing the path he would sooner or later have to walk. Tupan was different from an early age, and everyone in the village noticed it. While other children were content to play near campfires or run along dirt paths, he ventured ever further afield, disappearing into the trees as if he were one of them. The nickname Wanderer wasn't born for nothing. It seemed his feet knew no rest, and his heart always sought something beyond the horizon. Tupan's sin were strange markings, natural designs reminiscent of ancient symbols, as if the forest itself had written a secret message on him. Some said they were signs of protection. Others whispered they were omens of an uncertain destiny. He didn't care about their opinions. He simply kept walking, as if the marks were trails etched into his own body. Despite his restless spirit, Tupan was not aloof. He enjoyed listening to his elders and learning the stories they kept on their lips. He observed every detail, the way the fire flickered as they spoke, the cadence of their words, the pauses laden with mystery. But deep down, he didn't just want to listen. He wanted to live his own stories, to experience firsthand what seemed reserved only for myths. It was impossible not to notice the restlessness that shone in his eye. There were nights when Tupan would sit alone by the river, gazing at the moon's reflection in the water, as if searching for an answer. Something inside him whispered that his life was destined, not only for the trails of Kalari, but for paths no one had yet dared to tread. As time passed, that restlessness within Tupan only grew. Each morning in Kalari seemed too beautiful to be routine, and each night left him with the feeling that something beyond the village was calling him. It was as if the forest whispered his name, hiding answers behind the shadows and the winds that danced among the trees. This call came not from without, but from within, beating like an extra heart within his chest. Many tried to calm him, telling him that life was simple: hunt, celebrate, love, and die in Kalari. But Tupan couldn't accept this calm as destiny. He daydreamed of paths no one dared tread, imagined rivers never sailed, and lands that existed only in the words of elders. With each story he heard, he felt that those legendary journeys were somehow connected to his blood. Sometimes he would sit for hours in silence, staring into the endless forest. His friends would call out to him, but he remained motionless, as if listening to something no one else could hear. It was a kind of secret music, a gentle melody vibrating deep within his, and the more he tried to ignore it, the stronger the sound became, pushing him forward. It didn't take long for Tupan to realize his life in Kalari was just the beginning. The village was part of him, but not the whole. Something awaited him on the other side of the forest, something that would only reveal its essence if he had the courage to leave the familiar behind. And this calling brooked no delay. When Tupan revealed his desire to leave, the entire village seemed to hold its breath. It was unusual for someone to defy the forest's limits, much less announce it in front of everyone. The elders gathered in the largest house, lit by torches that cast dancing shadows on the mud walls. The silence was heavy, as if even the wind awaited their decision. The elders listened calmly, each word piercing the air like invisible arrows. Some frowned, others just shook their heads, as if they had already known this moment would come. Tupan firmly said he sought neither glory nor power. He simply wanted to understand where he came from, and why the marks on his skin made him feel like a stranger in his own village. After a long murmur, the eldest among them stood up. His voice was low, but carried the weight of centuries. He said that the forest holds many paths, and that each one exacts a price. He warned that the wanderer who dares to cross its borders must be ready to get lost, perhaps forever. But he also let slip that sometimes it is in getting lost that one finds who one truly is. The assembly ended without any prohibitions. No elders prevented him from leaving, and none openly encouraged him. It was as if they knew his journey was already written, and that denying it would be futile. Tupan left with a heavy heart, but also inflamed, for he knew he was about to cross the line where legend and reality merge. Tupan's few possessions was one object that always kept him a mystery. An ancient necklace made of braided rope with a fragment of blue stone at its center. It was said his mother had left it to him before she disappeared, when he was still too young to cherish memories. The amulet seemed ordinary at first glance, but when it caught the firelight, it revealed hues that changed like the sky at dusk. Many in the village believed the stone did not belong to Kalari. Some elders claimed it was part of a rock that had fallen from the sky itself. Others, more silently, suspected it held secrets from a tribe lost in time. Tupan never knew the truth, but the amulet always gave him the strange feeling of being guided, as if it were an invisible compass. On full moon nights, the necklace seemed to vibrate almost imperceptibly. Tupan felt its gentle warmth against his chest, a pulse that matched the rhythm of his heart. Sometimes he thought he heard a whisper coming from it, so low it blended with the wind. It was in these moments that he most remembered his inner calling, as if the stone held the key to unlocking the path to his own origin. One day, walking alone along the riverbank, Tupan noticed something even stranger. The amulet glowed as he approached a stone covered in ancient symbols. It was no coincidence. There was a deep connection between that necklace and the mysteries of the forest, and deep down, he knew his destiny was intertwined with this secret that was just beginning to reveal itself. The day of departure arrived silently, without celebration or loud farewell. Only the watchful eyes of the village followed Tupan as he crossed the log gate that marked the border of Kalari. He carried little a bow, small leather bag filled with dried roots, and the amulet hanging securely around his neck. It was enough, for he knew the forest would require more courage than any material object. The first step outside the village felt different from all the others. The ground was the same, covered in leaves and roots, but there was something in the air, as if the forest were watching his every move. The silence wasn't empty. It was dense, full of hidden sounds, of secrets that seemed to stir among the branches. With each breath, Tupan felt he was entering a territory where human laws no longer held sway. The hours passed like a dream. He crossed crystal-clear streams, climbed moss-covered rocks, and entered clearings, illuminated by shafts of sunlight that barely touched the ground. The forest seemed to test his limits, sometimes making his path difficult, sometimes opening narrow passages, as if to guide him. The amulet on his chest warmed slightly, pulsing in response to each bold step. As night fell, Tupan built a small fire and sat in silence, surrounded by invisible eyes that glowed in the darkness. There was no fear in his heart, only the strange feeling that he was being watched, and somehow accepted by the forest. The journey had only just begun, but it already bore signs that the unknown awaited him just ahead. From the very first days, Tupan realized that the forest was not only vast, but also changeable. Trails he had marked with stones disappeared. Familiar clearings appeared in different places, as if the forest itself were alive and playing with his perception. Immense trees seemed to shift position, closing paths, or opening passages, according to an invisible way. There was no logic, only the sensation of being in a labyrinth created by ancient hands. One morning, as he walked in silence, he heard his own name whispered by the wind. He looked around, but there was no one there. The voice seemed to emerge from the leaves, laden with a softness that sent shivers down his spine. He continued walking, and soon more symbols began to appear, engraved on moss-covered stone. They were curved lines and twisted lines that resembled the marks on his own skin, as if the forest spoke the language of his body. Tupan tried to decipher the signs, but each time he fixed his gaze on them, the shapes seemed to change meaning. It was like looking at moving water, never the same, never static. With each new mark he found,
The amulet on his chest glowed faintly, indicating a deep connection between him and those enigmas scattered throughout the forest. It was impossible to ignore, as if the entire journey were being written just for him. Deep down, Tupan felt he wasn't walking alone. Something was guiding him, shaping the paths, testing his courage, revealing just the right amount of clues. But what was the forest's true purpose? To protect him or prepare him for something even greater? This question echoed in his mind with every step, opening up a new mystery he needed to face. That night, the forest seemed more alive than ever. The wind blew low, but every branch creaked, as if in warning. Tupan lit a small fire, just enough to warm his hands, and kept a close eye on his surroundings. It was then that he noticed dozens of glowing eyes appeared in the darkness, reflecting the flame like stars trapped between the trees. They were no ordinary animals, for their movements were so silent, almost calculated. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of loneliness. His heart pounded, but there was no blind fear, but rather a strange curiosity, as if those creatures were expecting something from him. Tupan took the bow but didn't raise it. He stood still, staring into the eyes watching him, trying to figure out if they were enemies or guardians. The entire forest seemed to hold its breath along with him. The eyes drew closer, forming a perfect circle around the fire. The silence was so intense that even the crackling of the flame seemed too loud. No creature attacked, no sound of threat was heard, only the feeling of judgment, as if his soul were being weighed before forces not of this world. The amulet on his chest burned softly, as if recognizing him before them. After minutes that felt like hours, the eyes disappeared, one by one, dissolving into the darkness. The night returned to just night, but Tupan knew something had happened. It wasn't an attack, but the forest, silently, had just measured his courage, and he had been accepted to take the next step. After days of wandering aimlessly, Tupan found something he hadn't expected. Ruins hidden among thick roots and vines that nearly swallowed the place. There were the remains of circular stone houses, now broken and covered in moss. The silence there was strange, heavy, as if each stone held memories of voices erased by time. He felt a shiver, not of fear, but of reverence. Exploring cautiously, Tupan noticed symbols carved into the still-standing walls. The markings were ancient, but they bore the same design as the one he bore on his skin. It was as if the ruins were speaking directly to him, revealing a connection that had previously seemed impossible. The amulet glowed faintly, responding to the inscriptions, as if recognizing the place. Amid the rubble, he found abandoned objects, fragments of pottery, bones carefully arranged in circles, and faded paintings depicting battles and rituals. Tupan touched the figures, trying to understand, and felt a strange familiarity. It was as if his forgotten memory was trying to awaken, connecting him to a people who seemed to have vanished from the world. As the wind blew past carrying a whistle through the ruins, Tupan had the feeling he wasn't alone. He couldn't see anyone, but he swore he heard light footsteps behind him. Perhaps they were echoes of the past, perhaps presences that still lingered in that sacred space. Whatever the case, he knew he had just found a fragment of his true origin, and this would change his journey forever. As he walked among the ruins, a thick mist began to appear, covering every stone, every root, until everything became a sea of white. The air grew colder, and the sounds of the forest suddenly fell silent. It was in this dense silence that Tupan saw a figure form before him, a woman shrouded in smoke, faceless, but with a presence that seemed as ancient as the earth itself. The guardian didn't speak in ordinary words. Her voice was like an echo that rose directly into the mind, mixing memories and feelings. She asked Tupan why he had left his village, and each answer he gave seemed to spark new questions, deeper than the ones before. It wasn't an interrogation, but a constant enigma, as if she wanted to measure the steadfastness of his spirit. She approached slowly, and where her feet touched, the mist moved like living water. She extended one of her smoke-like hands toward the amulet on Tupan's chest, and as she touched it, the stone glowed brightly, illuminating the darkness. The guardian then revealed that the object was the key to a forgotten inheritance, but that only courage could unlock its true power. Before disappearing, the guardian left one last phrase engraved in his heart: "The forest holds no answers, only mirrors. What you seek outside you will find within." Soon after, the mist dissipated, as quickly as it had come, and Tupan was left alone, with the echo of her words burning in his mind. Tupan's shoulders. With every step, the guardian's words echoed in his mind, opening old wounds and awakening memories he hadn't even known he possessed. At night he dreamed of unfamiliar faces, and villages he'd never seen but which seemed familiar. It was as if pieces of his history, scattered through time, were finally coming together. In a quiet clearing, he found stones lined up in a circle, covered in symbols similar to the markings on his skin. He touched one of them and had a vision, a woman with intense eyes, holding the same amulet he carried. She handed it to someone, and then disappeared in flames and smoke. The impact was so strong that Tupan fell to his knees, gasping, certain that the woman was his mother. The vision also revealed that his home village was not Kalari. He had been brought here as a baby, saved from a tragedy that had destroyed his people. This truth throbbed in his mind like an open wound. What had once been merely suspicion, now became a painful certainty. He was a survivor of something far greater than he had imagined. But even with this revelation, clarity didn't come complete. His memories were fragmented, like pieces of a broken mirror. There were gaps that still needed filling, answers hidden in places he hadn't yet reached, and it was precisely this incompleteness that drove him on. The following night, Tupan was overcome by an even more intense vision. The sky was covered in heavy clouds, and a cold wind seemed to whisper voices from forgotten times. Closing his eyes, he found himself in the center of a circle of fire, surrounded by hooded figures chanting grave song. On the ground, ash mixed with blood, forming symbols that glowed like live coals. At the heart of the ritual, Tupan saw again the woman he believed to be his mother. She stretched out her arms toward him, but her expression was one of pain and farewell. The amulet on her chest burned like embers, responding to the energy of that moment. Then, a deep voice echoed, "The wanderer belongs nowhere, for he carries within himself all paths." It was a revelation, and at the same time, a condemnation. When he opened his eyes, he could still smell the smoke lingering on his clothes. He didn't know if it had been just a dream, or if he had actually participated in an ancient rite that had spanned generations. The words, however, continued to echo within him, bringing clarity and torment at the same time. It was as if he had discovered the weight of a destiny he could not refuse. Tupan understood that he was searching not only for his origins, but for something much greater, the awakening of an eternal spirit that dwelt within him. This spirit, marked by blood and ash, condemned him to never belong to a single land, but also gave him the strength to walk where no one else would dare. And the journey still held trials he could barely imagine. After the disturbing visions, Tupan felt the weight of exhaustion on his soul. For the first time, he seriously considered returning to Kalari. The memory of the campfires, the laughter of children, and the smell of grilled fish pulled him like an invisible rope. The forest seemed even more hostile now, and the thought of resting again under the village's roof felt like an almost irresistible relief. As he walked, he imagined the elders' reaction. Perhaps they would welcome him back silently, without judgment. Perhaps they would even say his quest had been merely a youthful delusion, something soon to be forgotten. There was a sweetness in the possibility of return, as if Kalari could erase all the pain and visions that had been haunting his heart. But at the same time, something kept him from turning back. The amulet on his chest pulsed as if alive, reminding him of the answers he had yet to find. Every tree, every symbol, and every ruin seemed to beckon him forward, as if the world outside held truths that would never be revealed within the safety of the village. Tupan walked this dilemma, between the comfort of home and the abyss of the unknown. Deep down, he knew the forest wouldn't let him return so easily. It was as if each step toward Kalari was pushed back by an invisible force, reaffirming that his journey wasn't over yet. In the middle of a silent night, Tupan encountered something he never would have imagined. Before him rose a bridge, made entirely of bones, long, white, intertwined as if invisible hands had shaped them over centuries. There were no ropes or wood, just fragile structures, supporting the path suspended over a mist-shrouded abyss. The wind blew through the cracks, producing sounds reminiscent of distant laments. He hesitated. The bridge floor felt unstable, creaking as if it might break at any moment. But there was also a magnetic pull there, a calling that came both from the forest and from the amulet on his chest, which now burned brightly. It was as if the entire journey up to this point had been nothing more than preparation for crossing this threshold. As he approached, he noticed symbols engraved on some of the bones. They were inscriptions, similar to those he had seen on the ruins and stones of the forest. Each mark seemed to tell a part of his own story, as if the bridge were a book of bones written especially for him. With each step he felt he was walking on the memory of a forgotten people. Tupan placed his foot on the first plank of bones, and the creak echoed like thunder. The chill of the abyss crept through his body, but courage prevailed. He knew there was no turning back. Either he crossed, or he would forever be a prisoner of doubt. And so, taking a deep breath, he began to walk upon the impossible. As he walked across the bridge of bones, Tupan felt the true weight, not beneath his feet, but within him. Every creak of the structure seemed to echo in his mind, bringing to the surface doubts, fears, and memories he'd tried to hide. The emptiness of the abyss wasn't just physical, it was a reflection of his own uncertainty, as if each step forced him to face the thing he feared most. The voices of the forest began to whisper in his mind, reminding him of everything he had left behind. What if there is no truth at all? What if it's all just an illusion? The questions pierced like arrows, making his heart falter. For a moment, he considered giving up, surrendering to the wind and letting fate carry him away. But something stronger kept him going, the feeling that running away from himself would be the biggest mistake of his life. The amulet on his chest pulsed like never before, radiating warmth that seemed to reach the depths of his soul. It was as if saying, "Look within." Tupan closed his eyes for a moment, and realized he wasn't facing external monsters, but the emptiness of his own identity. The confrontation wasn't with the forest, nor with spirits. It was with the fear of being nobody. Opening his eyes, he felt his footsteps steady. The bridge no longer seemed so unstable, and the abyss, though deep, no longer paralyzed him. Tupan understood, in the silence, that he could only move forward if he accepted who he was, even if he didn't have all the answers. And with this new strength, he advanced across the bridge, ready for what would come next. When he reached the end of the bridge of bones, Tupan found two trails before him. To the left, a path that led back to the familiar edges of the forest, where the wind carried memories of Kalari. To the right, a narrow corridor, steeped in shadow and silence, as if it were the entrance to a world of no return. It was the crossroads of his life, and each choice seemed to scream inside his mind. He closed his eyes and felt the weight of both possibility. To return would be to rediscover the comfort, the familiar faces, and the security of routine, but it would also mean forever carrying the emptiness of unanswered questions. To move on was to surrender to the unknown, to uncertainty, and perhaps never see his village again. But there was something seductive about this idea, as if it were there, in the shadows, that his true essence awaited. The amulet on his chest pulsed strongly, but indicated no direction. This time, the decision would come not from external signs, but from the heart. Tupan realized that neither path was completely right or wrong. Both were paths of courage, but only one would reveal the destiny for which he was born. The silence of the forest seemed to wait patiently for his choice. With a steadying breath, he took a step forward. He didn't look back. He didn't hesitate. He chose to follow the path of the shadows, accepting that his life wouldn't be made of easy answers. There, in that moment, Tupan stopped being just a wanderer in search of origin, and became someone willing to carry the burden of a greater destiny. The trail of shadows led Tupan to a place that seemed suspended between the real and the impossible. The mist slowly parted, revealing the village of Kalari before him. But something was wrong. There was no smoke rising from the fires, no voices, no children's laughter. The houses stood there, intact but empty, as if all life had suddenly vanished. The silence was so profound that even the wind itself seemed to have fled. He walked among the huts, calling out familiar names, but no one answered. It was like walking in a deserted dream, where everything remained but the people. The ground still bore footprints, but they were frozen in time, as if the village had been abandoned in a single breath. Tupan's heart he pressed, torn between astonishment and sadness.
In the center of the village, the great bonfire remained lit, though there was no one to feed it. The flames flickered on their own, casting shadows that seemed to dance around him. It was then that he realized He was no longer the Kalari he had known, but a reflection, a living memory, a reminder of what he would never be again. The amulet glowed brightly, confirming that he no longer belonged there.